I left last video on a bit of a cliffhanger, but this week's secret underrated paradise is Neltjeberg Bay. Neltjeberg Bay is on the north side of St. Thomas, right next to Dorothea and Little Neltjeberg. So to get to Neltjeberg, there is a little bit of a hike. There are two different options that you can pick from. Both hikes start at Dorothea Beach. The hike that I recommend is the one that I'm currently on in this video, which is the actual hiking trail. I parked right next to the hiking trail, so if you want to see a little bit more in depth of where to park, check out my previous video about Dorothea and Little Neltjeberg. I'll link that in the description below. When you get to the fork in the road, if you want to get to Neltjeberg, you're going to choose to go to the left. If you choose to go to the right, that's the path that will take you to Little Neltjeberg. And again, my previous video goes into more depth about this. The other hiking option is to climb the big rocks along the beach, which is where I was coming from at the beginning of the video. For this hike, you have to start on Dorothea Beach and go to the left where all these rocks and boulders are. These rocks will lead you to Little Neltjeberg, so if you want to stop there, that's fine. But if you want to make it to Neltjeberg, you're going to have to cross Little Neltjeberg and continue climbing the rocks until you reach the beach. So not the easiest hike, but it is an option. Now back to the hiking trail. If you make it to this little waterway stream thing, that means you're going in the right direction. After crossing, there was this red-footed tortoise, which was my first time ever seeing one in the wild, so that was super cool. And shortly after, I got to this concrete slab, which is the ending of the drive down to Neltjeberg. I heard the drive down could be kind of rough, so I didn't really want to risk it. But I did find someone else's video of them driving down, so I'll link that in the description below if you want to check out the drive. Overall, I would definitely recommend the hiking trail over climbing over all those rocks. But here's the beach. It's definitely one of the bigger ones on the island, and it reminds me a lot of Magen's Bay. And although there aren't any amenities here like there are at Magen's, the trade-off is there are almost no people at this beach. This beach is also dog friendly, which is a very unique aspect. So starting off, we're going to focus on the left side of the beach. On the left side of the beach, there are a lot more of these trees overgrown and really on the sand and in the beach. So there's a lot less space to set up any gear that you might have, like towels or chairs or anything. There's also a very shallow reef. You can see all the dark spots in the water, and that's the reef. Because it's so shallow and there is so much reef and rock everywhere, it is kind of difficult to get out to swim and snorkel in. It's definitely possible, and since the water's so clear, you can see exactly where you're stepping. So if you can find those sand patches to get like thigh or waist high, you can definitely get in and check out the reef. You just can't get very far and you risk running into coral or rocks. But due to the fact that the reef is so shallow and there's so many crevices in the rocks, it does make a great nursery for fish. So there are a ton of super small fish everywhere, with an occasional big fish. Also on the left side, you'll find less of the white sand and more of these patches of rocks and shells, which make great shell hunting. Now, if you enter the water immediately to the right of the reef, where it's no longer reef and just sand, the water for some reason is super murky and cloudy. But the weirdest part is the bottom, like the ocean floor, is clear, and as you get closer to the surface, it gets murky, and there's like a murky cloud over everything. And if you go slightly more right, the water completely clears up, just like this. But you can see what I'm talking about a little bit more about the hazy cloud. You can see the clarity of the ocean floor, and then it just fades into a cloud. So bizarre, I don't know why it does that. But the water does clear up and become a really pretty blue. And although there isn't as much sea life in the middle of Neltjeberg, where all the sand is, there definitely is still some. For example, all these fish. This was right in the middle of the beach. I just swam straight out and ran into it and just kind of watched it for a while. And although it was super cool, I also saw a giant barracuda, which kind of freaked me out, so I decided to leave the fish alone. Now on to the right side of the beach. The right side also has a reef, but this reef is farther out and much easier to snorkel around. Now, the first time I came to Neltjeberg, this is what the water looked like. It was super clear, very easy to see, sun was shining through. But the second time I came, this is what the water looked like. So it was super murky, kind of difficult to see where I was going. But then boom, there were a ton of fish. However, even when it was murky, the snorkeling was still amazing. There were so many fish. They were in different sizes, different colors, different shapes, different species, everything. And they were all over. There was also a lot of coral to check out as well, which was super cool. But the right side of the beach is definitely a much better snorkeling spot and a great snorkeling spot for a beach overall. Now, a word of caution before you go. Although this beach isn't known for its surfable waves, there definitely are some crashing waves over the reef. And even though there aren't that many waves, the waves that do crash over you can pack a punch. These were definitely some of the stronger waves that I've been in at St. Thomas. And although you're not really at risk at bumping into anything, I would still be very careful because the ocean is very unpredictable and very strong. All right, let's review it. I would give water quality and sand quality a 6 out of 10. The water quality was definitely hit or miss. The left side of the beach was super murky, the middle was clear, and then the right side was clear one time I went, but the other time I went, it was super murky. So not super consistent. Plus the crashing waves. The sand on the beach was mostly very white and soft, but again, on the left side, it was rocky and shelly, which can be a pro or con depending on what you want. And then entering and exiting the water, there were these somewhat bigger rocks, which are kind of uncomfortable on your feet. The snorkeling here was probably an 8 out of 10, especially when the water was clear. There were fish under every rock, that giant bait ball, and a barracuda, which was a little scary, but still, there was tons to see. There were no rentals or amenities, and there were also no crowds. There were a few people both times I went, but again, not very many, and the beach is fairly large, so you have plenty of space to set up wherever you want. So probably a 5 out of 10. Accessibility and parking is a 4 out of 10. Not the easiest beach access. You either have to climb a bunch of rocks or take a fairly short hike, and the drive down is also not a piece of cake. However, once you get down, it is basically beachside parking. The scenery and surrounding area is pretty cool. The beach backs right up against a forest, and there were also these ruins which were pretty cool, and my first time seeing them. I know there are a bunch of ruins all over St. Thomas, but this was my first time getting an up-close look, and that was pretty awesome. So I'd probably give that an 8 out of 10. Overall, I would give Neltjeberg a 7 out of 10. Alright, that's it for today's beach. If you liked what you saw, go ahead and subscribe. It really helps me spread the word about the beauty of St. Thomas. Catch you at the next one!